The distress beacon had been active for 19 hours. Commander Urel of the Valari Compact knew exactly how long because she had been watching the counter on her console tick upward since the moment their ship, the Pale Meridian, had dropped out of transit drive, with a collapsed engine core and 3 hull breaches opening like slow wounds along the starboard quarter. She knew the number the way you know a thing that is slowly killing you. Intimately, precisely, without the luxury of looking away. 19 hours. In open void. In the Kethera corridor. The corridor was contested space. That was the polite word. The Vreth Collective used less polite words for it. Hunting ground was the one that translated most cleanly into galactic standard. The Vreth didn't distinguish between military and civilian vessels when they found something drifting and helpless in their territory. They distinguished only between targets that could fight back and targets that couldn't. The Pale Meridian could not fight back. She had 2 functioning point defense turrets, 41 crew, 63 passengers, mostly researchers and their families, returning from a long-term survey station, and enough power reserves to keep life support running for approximately another 30 hours. Her communication array was working fine. That was, in its own dark way, the cruelest part. She could scream into the void as clearly as she liked. She just had no reason to believe anyone who heard her would come. The Valari Compact's nearest military response fleet was 6 hours away at maximum transit. 6 hours was a diplomatic answer, not a real one. In 6 hours, the Vreth would have already completed their boarding action and vanished back into the corridor's debris fields. Urel had sent the distress call anyway. Protocol demanded it. Hope demanded it, in the quieter voice that protocol tries to drown out. What she had not done was send the call on the human emergency frequency. That had been Lieutenant Osek's idea. Osek was young enough to have grown up after the Terran integration accords, young enough that humans were simply a fact of his universe rather than a recent and unsettling development. He had suggested it in the careful voice of someone who knew their idea might be dismissed but believed in it anyway. The HEF has a range advantage, he said. Humans built it with their own relay architecture, independent of the compact grid. We are not a human vessel, Urel said. No, but the accords include mutual distress provisions. Article 17. He pulled it up on his screen. Any vessel in distress may use the HEF. Any human military asset receiving the signal is, he found the word, encouraged to respond. Encouraged, not required, not obligated. Urel looked at the hull breach counter. She looked at the timer. She thought about 63 passengers, most of them scientists who had spent years mapping the edges of the known and had not expected the edge to find them first. Send it, she said. Emma heard the signal from the Pale Meridian 11 minutes after Osek transmitted it. She was the communications officer aboard the TUWS Relentless Meridian, Terran Unified Warship, Hammer class, one of 7 vessels running a patrol rotation through the outer Kethera sectors. She had been running a diagnostic on the secondary array when the HEF alert cut through every other frequency with the particular insistence of something that had been designed specifically to be impossible to miss. She had the signal parsed, located, and cross-referenced with patrol positions in 40 seconds. She had Captain Jack on the line in 41. How far? Jack said. He had been awake. She could tell by the absence of any transition in his voice. Jack slept the way soldiers learn to sleep on long deployments, lightly and at the edge of readiness, so that waking was not a state change, but simply a shift in degree of alertness. 19 light minutes. Hammer drive. We're looking at 22 minutes transit time. A pause. Not hesitation, calculation. Vreth response window. Best estimate. They intercept the Pale Meridian in roughly 40 minutes. We'd arrive with 18 minutes to spare. She paused. If we go right now. Vreth patrol strength in the corridor this rotation? Unknown. Last intelligence assessment put 3 Hunter-class vessels in this sector. Could be fewer. Could be more. 3 Vreth Hunter-class against 1 Hammer-class. Emma had run the numbers before Jack asked because she knew he would ask, and she believed in not making commanding officers wait for information they needed. The numbers were not comfortable. They were not the numbers of an engagement where the outcome was guaranteed. They were, however, the numbers of an engagement that could be won. Sound general quarters, Jack said. Inform the crew we are responding to a civilian distress call under Article 17. Transit in 4 minutes. Aye, Captain. Emma opened the ship-wide channel. Her voice went to every corridor, every station, every bunk where off-rotation crew were sleeping. She gave them the facts. Vessel in distress, Kethera corridor, civilians aboard, Vreth threat window, departure in 4 minutes. She did not dress it up. The relentless crew did not need their information dressed up. They needed it accurate and fast. She was still talking when she heard the sound of boots hitting deck plating throughout the ship, the specific percussion of a crew moving to battle stations, and doing it without argument. That sound, she had always thought, was one of the most human sounds in the universe. The Vreth arrived at the Pale Meridian in 37 minutes. 2 Hunter-class vessels, running dark until they dropped their stealth fields at close range, a psychological tactic as much as a tactical one. The sudden materialization of 2 warships out of empty void was designed to break crew morale before the first shot was fired. It worked, reliably, on most species the Vreth had encountered. Yrel watched them appear on her screens and felt something in her chest go cold and steady. She had already moved all passengers to the interior compartments. She had already instructed her crew on non-combatant protocols for Vreth boarding actions, how to minimize casualties, what to surrender immediately, what was not worth dying for. She had not given up hope. She had simply filed it in the category of things that were no longer actionable. Then her communications array lit up. Not the Vreth hailing frequency. The HEF, Emergency Override Channel, signal strength so high it practically rang. Pale Meridian, this is TUWS Relentless, Captain Jack commanding. We have your position. We are 90 seconds out. Do not respond to Vreth hail. Maintain position. We are coming. 90 seconds. Yrel looked at the Vreth vessels on her screen. They had not fired yet. They were still running boarding approach, confident enough in their tactical position that they weren't hurrying. Standard Vreth procedure. Why waste ammunition on something that wasn't going anywhere? She opened her internal channel. All crew. All passengers. She kept her voice level. A Terran warship is 90 seconds from our position. We are going to be fine. The sound that came back through the ship was something she had not heard in 19 hours. It was breathing. 63 researchers and 41 crew, all of them suddenly, audibly, breathing again. The Relentless did not arrive quietly. Jack had made a tactical decision in the final minutes of approach that Emma had logged in the ship's record as unconventional and privately classified as magnificent. Rather than dropping from transit drive at standard safe distance and proceeding at combat speed, he had pushed the hammer drive to its absolute operational boundary, dropping from transit at a range that made the Relentless navigational officer go white and recite the calculation 3 times to confirm it wasn't a system error. They came out of transit drive screaming. The sensor ghost alone, the gravity displacement wake of a Hammer-class vessel dropping from transit at that proximity, hit both Vreth Hunter-class ships like a physical blow. Their stealth fields collapsed under the sensor interference. Their formation broke as automated collision avoidance systems fired lateral thrusters in different directions. For 11 seconds, 2 Vreth warships designed for ambush and intimidation were disorganized, exposed, and trying to figure out what had just happened. 11 seconds is a long time when the other side is ready. Emma fired targeting solutions before the transit bloom had fully cleared. Main rail batteries, port and starboard simultaneously. Not at full destructive yield. Jack had specified precision over annihilation, and she had agreed with the reasoning, because annihilation in the Kethera corridor would feed diplomatic complications for years, but a decisive and painful demonstration would feed a different kind of lesson. The first salvo took out the drive manifolds on both Vreth vessels. Precision work. The kind that required either extraordinary luck or extraordinary preparation. Emma had spent 3 days before this patrol rotation updating her targeting calibrations. The Vreth were not destroyed. They were stopped. They were bleeding atmosphere from secondary hull damage and making frantic calculations about whether the engagement math had changed and concluding, rapidly, that it had changed entirely. They withdrew. Not a retreat in the chaotic sense, a withdrawal. Controlled. Fast. The movement of combatants who had decided, with professional dispassion, that this particular target was no longer worth what it would cost. Jack watched them go on the main screen. He did not cheer. He did not make a speech. He picked up the communication channel to the Pale Meridian and said, simply, "Commander Yrel, this is Captain Jack. We're going to send an engineering team for your hull breaches. Are there injured aboard? On the other end of the channel, Urel's voice came back with a texture Emma had not expected from a Valari officer, something raw and unguarded. No critical injuries, Urel said. Captain, you came. You used the frequency, Jack said. That's what it's for. A pause. Your ship's name. Relentless. Yes. It's accurate. Jack looked across the bridge at Emma, who was already coordinating the engineering team deployment and the medical scan of the Pale Meridian's passenger compartments. He had a particular expression, the one he wore when things had gone exactly as they needed to go, and the relief of that was too large to fit into any single reaction, so it just sat quietly behind his eyes. Get us alongside, he said. Emma was already doing it. The Relentless moved to the Pale Meridian's starboard, dwarfing her, blocking the void on one side like a wall between the wounded ship and everything that might still be out there in the dark. Boarding umbilicals connected. Engineers with hull patch kits and welding arrays crossed over. 63 researchers who had mapped the edges of the known were going home. 19 hours and 41 minutes after the distress beacon had activated, Urel sat in her command chair and listened to the sound of human boots moving through her corridors, purposeful, fast, bringing tools instead of weapons, and thought about Article 17 of the Terran Integration Accords. Encouraged to respond, she was going to recommend, in her official after-action report, that the language be changed. Relentless was more accurate.